What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are going to be talking about one of the most overlooked additions the Detroit Lions made this offseason, and he will not be on the field this season. Let's get it started. Welcome, everybody, to another video. Glad you guys are here. And today, we are talking about the Detroit Lions' brand new defensive coordinator, Cory Undlin. Now, we haven't talked about Cory Undlin a lot on this channel. I'm pretty sure I've told you guys where he came from, and I showed you a couple of film clips about him. But today, I'm going to be telling you guys why Cory Undlin may be able to have the next Darrell Bevell effect. So I think as fans, we get very caught up in the names we bring in, the players we bring in. We get really excited. Oh, I want a jersey of that guy. This guy's a beast. Watch his film. Watch his highlights. Look at his stats. But one thing we easily forget is the addition of coaches. And no matter how small those additions may be, they are very important. And in this case, this is very important because this is a defensive coordinator. This is a very big position on the team. And what we saw last year is, while players are great, you need to have a great coach for those players to excel. With Darrell Bevell as the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator last year, let's just say they took it to another level. The Detroit Lions offense in 2018 was well below average. And it was the first time in 7 years that Matthew Stafford did not hit 4,000 passing yards. Only 3,700 passing yards and 21 touchdowns. The Detroit Lions offense was flat out boring. 21 passing touchdowns. Meanwhile, the very next season, with the addition of one man, Cory Undlin, Matthew Stafford has the best 8-game stretch of his career, and the Detroit Lions are on pace to lead the league in passing yards and averaging 25.5 points per game before Stafford went down. I know I feel like I'm repeating those numbers over and over and over, but it is so huge how this team changed. Matthew Stafford played in 8 less games and nearly had the same amount of touchdowns in 2019 and 2018. Are you serious? That tells you how important these coordinators are, and we can't overlook these guys. So today we're going to be talking about Cory Undlin and why he may be able to have that Darrell Bevell effect in year one for the Detroit Lions. And if he can, watch out NFL, because if we get a defense, the North is ours, baby. Let's talk about Cory Undlin. Now, I've talked about him a couple of times before and where he's came from, so we're not going to touch on that too much, but I'll give you guys a tiny little background. Basically, Cory Undlin has never been a defensive coordinator in the NFL before. However, he has been many assistants in the NFL. He's worked on the defensive side of the ball a lot. His last 2 jobs were as a defensive backs coach, and he has been a defensive quality control coach. So he is around the defense a ton. He's also familiar with Matt Patricia and slept in the same room together. They were working together for 1 year.
Bond was formed in 2004 when we both showed up in New England. Doesn't know how that goes. I mean, slept in the office together for damn near a year. So when you do that, you have a tendency to get pretty close with people.
Today, we are talking about Cory Undlin. Now, what's great about Cory Undlin is that now, while he's our new defensive coordinator, maybe saying, well, new defensive coordinator is a big role. This guy's never done it before, and we're going to ask this guy to call plays. Well, the great thing about the Detroit Lions is that's not what we need from Cory Undlin. See, with the Detroit Lions, they have a guy, Matt Patricia, their head coach. That is the guy that's going to be calling the shots defensively. He did it last season with Paul Pasqualoni, and he's going to continue to do that. They may implement a few new ideas from Cory Undlin, but he's going to call the shots. So Cory Undlin doesn't have to have those responsibilities as the Detroit Lions defensive coordinator and play caller. Sure, he's got to know what's going on, but he's just going to try to make the Detroit Lions excel in one area, and that is where Cory Undlin thrives. See, one of the most important, if not the most important position in Matt Patricia's defense is the secondary. Now, you may be saying, why? Why is that so important? Well, when you play the most man-to-man defense in the league and you don't blitz, and in back-to-back years, you're one of the lowest teams in blitz, you definitely are putting a lot of stress on those cornerbacks. And the Detroit Lions last season, defensively against the pass, were really bad. And that needs to improve. And what is Cory Undlin's specialty? Well, as I mentioned, his last 2 jobs were as the defensive backs coach, and that is exactly who the Detroit Lions hired. They also made additions of Desmond Trufant and Jeffrey Okudah, but as I mentioned, if you don't have the right coach, it doesn't really matter. So, let's talk about Cory Undlin, the defensive backs coach that is coming in to hopefully improve our secondary, because that is a main problem with our team right now, and there's a couple of ones specifically that I will be pointing out in today's video. So let's talk about how bad the Detroit Lions were against the pass last season, and we're only focusing on the pass because he was a second defensive backs coach, not a line coach or anything like that. So when you look at the Detroit Lions last year against the pass, let's just say they were awful. Now, they weren't terrible in completion percentage allowed, 14th in completion percentage allowed at 62.4%. However, after that stat, everything just goes downhill. Yes, already things are falling downhill. They were 32nd in yards allowed with 4,551. They were 29th in touchdowns allowed with 33. They were 31st in interceptions with 7. They were 13th in passes defended with 73, not bad. 26th in yards allowed per attempt, 28th in yards per completion, and 27th in quarterback rating. That is not good. That is not, nowhere is that good, all right? Where were they okay at pass defending? They were all right at that. But aside from that, that's not good. That's not good. The Lions play a lot of man-to-man defense, and that needs to improve. Now, what you're going to see with Cory Undlin, if you look at how he ranks in and year out, is that Cory Undlin is not a guy that is going to completely shut down an offense and they're not going to pass it. Teams will pass the ball against the Detroit Lions with Cory Undlin, and they may do it a ton, and he may give up some yards, and he may give up a lot of completions, and attempts. However, where he does thrive is limiting those plays, allowing a short yard per attempt and completion, and also coming up and forcing turnovers. When you have 7 interceptions on the season, you're going to have a problem. Turnovers may be the most vital play aside from third down percentage in the NFL. Turnovers are an absolute game changer just like that, and they're the ultimate equalizer. You can be garbage, but if you force a team to a couple of turnovers, all of a sudden, the game can be in your favor. Turnovers are gigantic. They're bigger than they are in basketball. They're bigger than they are in soccer, I guess. I don't know. They are huge in football. And with the Detroit Lions finishing 31st in the league in interceptions with only 7, I get it, they play man-to-man, but 7 is still not acceptable. That needs to get better. And the Detroit Lions brought in a guy that may be able to help out with that. So first off, we're going to look at some of these rankings just so I can show you guys about how he's ranked year in and year out. Okay, now obviously there's numbers behind these, which I have. I have let me just say I have a few numbers wrote down here. Let me just say I feel like I'm throwing out money right now. Like, oh my god. All right, no, there's another one over here. All right, but let's look at some of these rankings, and this is where you need to focus your attention, because sure, if you go look at his stats, you're gonna say, oh, he's giving up so many yards. And he's giving up a lot of attempts. Yes, he is. But he's limiting those plays, and he's forcing turnovers. And his completion percentage allowed is pretty good. So, we read the Detroit Lions stats. Let's start off with the completion percentage. So, Cory Undlin defensively is actually usually above average in completion percentage allowed. They're usually above average on the defenses that he's on. 6th, 14th, 12th, 5th, 13th, 1 year of 24th, and then we're all of a sudden back in the top 10. So only 1 year under average, only 1 year below average in completion percentage allowed to the rest of the league. Now we're going to touch a little bit deeper on the stats in a second. I just want to give you guys a quick little overview. So that's pretty good. I mean, we'll take that. Touchdowns, not so good at touchdowns allowed, not so great. I mean, some years are better than others in yards. He has like 1 or 2 good ones. For the most part, though, they're usually not great. But the 2 stats that you need to focus on with Cory Undlin is interceptions and pass defending. And he's in defenses that do play a lot of man, not as much as we do, but do. And he still finds a way to get some interceptions. For example, 14th, 8th, 12th, 9th, 8th, 25th, 23rd. Now, the last 2 years weren't great there, but are you seeing that, hey, he's forcing turnovers? Pass defended. And this is probably the biggest thing with Cory Undlin. This is where he really thrives defensively, and I'm really excited for this aspect. 5th, 4th, 9th, 10th, 3rd, 17th, and 6th. Only 1 year below average, and the rest are basically in the top 10. That is impressive. That on its own is extremely impressive. That is beautiful, and those are advanced stats. You can't just simply look at yards. A lot of variables go in that. A lot of variables get in touchdowns, passing attempts, things like that. But is he limiting the plays? Is he forcing turnovers that are game changers? Yes, he is. Passes defended. That's something that Matt Patricia loves, and that's probably a big reason he brought him in. Now, how about limiting plays? How does he do that? Well, with yards per completion and yards per attempt. Starting off with yards per attempt. 16th, 1st, 14th, 20th, 7th, 15th, 15th. All but 1 year above average. How about yards per completion? 25th, 1st, 14th, 26th, 8th, 10th, 24th. So a little bit like this, but as you can see, much better than pass rating allowed 17th, 8th, 18th, 17th, 9th, 15th. So again, still not too bad when it comes to passer rating allowed. All right, everybody. So we talked about Cory Undlin's numbers and the numbers that he has put up when he's worked in his last 2 jobs with the Denver Broncos and the Philadelphia Eagles. And just a couple of categories that I really wanted you to focus on was pass defended, forcing turnovers, usually pretty consistently, and yards allowed and yards per completion. But now I think we should move it to the field. And the things that I like on the field, and I think the things that he will bring to the table that Detroit Lions desperately needed defensively. Okay, so let's just start this thing off. Now, the first thing isn't necessarily something I would say that's on the field as much as players being behind him. So usually for the most part, when a coach is gone, most players are like, yeah, you know, I liked him, it stinks that they're gone, stuff like that. But we have seen situations where that's not really the case. Darius Slay, wow, this cough is bad. But we know that situation was not the best. But for the most part, players are usually, you know, have good things to say about coaches that leave. Whether or not they mean it or not is a different situation. But in this situation, you may be saying, well, that's all that this is. But Malcolm Jenkins really went out of his way to support Cory Undlin on being hired as a defensive coordinator, saying he basically deserved it. Malcolm Jenkins had Cory Undlin's back, and he really talked about the last 2 years, because the last 2 years, they took a little bit of a dip, and he basically said that it wasn't Cory Undlin's fault that they took that dip. He said it was because they were inexperienced and they were a young team, and they had basically average cornerbacks. They didn't have good cornerbacks. If you look at their cornerback group, one in 2018 who was very inexperienced, and it was a lot of new guys coming together aside from Ronald Darby. Nothing great. It's just okay. It's all right. You got solid corners. You don't have great players. The notion is always that Cory Undlin is taking these secondaries and making them play a lot better than their talent actually is, because in this case, Malcolm Jenkins is also backing up that point, saying that he did really well with the talent he basically had and the inexperience in players that he had, and he's a very good teacher. So he was really behind Cory Undlin being signed as the defensive coordinator, very happy for him, and we know Malcolm Jenkins is one of the best safeties in the NFL, so that's obviously a good thing. You know, we haven't had, I would say, the most player support. It's been a little bit rocky, so to get a guy like this that maybe the players can get very comfortable with, especially on the defensive side of the ball, I think is very important, and that could be very beneficial. We may need a guy like that. Now, when it comes to on the field, one big thing that I saw with Cory Undlin's defense, both in Denver and in Philadelphia, that I think is something that's kind of obviously a huge part of playing coverage, and that is disguises. Okay, I think this is perfect to talk about because it's kind of relevant, because as you guys can remember, we talked about Devontae Adams basically calling out the Detroit Lions saying, hey, look, every time we go in motion and a cornerback stays with him, it's man-to-man, all right? They don't disguise any or man or zone coverages. And for the most part, when I've looked back and watched, that is true. I haven't seen every single snap. Like, I don't remember every single snap, so I don't know if it's 100% true. But for the most part, what I've seen is that I can pretty much back it up to yes, we didn't disguise things very well last season. Well, when I watched Cory Undlin's defense, he disguises things really well. Like, things that are honestly confusing to me sometimes. Sometimes I have to rewatch it a couple times to just figure out if that was a zone or not, because there's a lot of confusing things that he will mix in. There are certain times where I'll see a slot or a tight end go back and forth with a cornerback, and it looks like that's clearly man. As soon as they snap it, they drop in the zone. It's a lot of confusing pieces, sometimes man and zone mixed. There are plays like that where you mix them together. There's a lot of disguises that Cory Undlin brings to the table, and I think when you look at the Detroit Lions defense last year, even if they did disguise a few times, they didn't do it very often. And if you look at the Lions secondary, that's definitely not going to help, and that's kind of just leaving them out to dry. So when you disguise those things and the quarterback doesn't necessarily know what's coming, that's big, because a lot of quarterbacks, especially veteran quarterbacks, and I mean pretty much the whole NFC North aside from the Bears, but you know, Aaron Rodgers, your Kirk Cousins, they're going to kind of be able to tell what you're in defensively after watching film, and then kind of going out there and making some pre-snap adjustments if you're not disguising anything. So you need to make sure you're disguising plays, and that's what I see with Cory Undlin's linebacker position. And if you go watch, especially the Philadelphia Eagles and their secondary and their coverage, their linebackers are very, very much involved. Kind of like Matt Patricia wants to have his linebackers with Jelani Tavai, Jimmy Collins, those guys. Well, when I watch the Philadelphia Eagles, I see their linebackers extremely involved. Sometimes setting up the interceptions for the secondary, getting tip balls, dropping into zone coverages, playing man-to-man. I saw the Broncos play some man-to-man with linebackers. That could be more of a scheme thing necessarily than just secondarily defensive backs coach, because he is a defensive backs coach, not a linebackers coach. But I think it is important to kind of note that, hey, linebackers could be very involved, and I think a name to keep an eye on could potentially be Elijah Lee out of Kansas State, because Elijah Lee was a solid coverage linebacker who looks like a guy that's not going to make the team. I would just say keep an eye out for him. I'm not saying he will, I would just say keep an eye out for a guy like Elijah Lee. This is one that I think we've talked about a lot because we've talked about the pressure a ton, and I could see the Detroit Lions looking to blitz more. Again, the teams that he's been with haven't blitzed a ton always, but they usually blitz more than Detroit Lions because Lions usually don't blitz at all. So for that point, I think the Detroit Lions could blitz a little bit more next season, especially with the way that Cory Undlin teaches his defensive backs. This is something that I love about how Cory Undlin teaches his defensive backs. He basically has them set a line, depending on where the play is going, especially if it's the first down or the end zone. They set a line and they don't give up that space. All right, they're not going to retreat and get that up and try to jump on it. They're not going to give up that. So say, for example, they're 10 yards away from the first down. Once he hits that line, there's no retreating. He's going to stand still. Unless the wide receiver pushes him back, Cory Undlin says he will stay with that receiver, and it takes a lot of players off their routes because, for example, there's one play, which I'll show on the screen, where Alshon Jeffrey kind of just, he's trying to go like to the inside of the end zone and then cut back to the corner of the end zone and get a touchdown by the pylon. Well, since he doesn't retreat and he stays on his hip and follows him back, that play is really disrupted because he's not able to get to the spot he is in, and the timing is thrown off, and he throws it and there's no one home. So because of that, I think for the Detroit Lions, we could see them blitz a little bit more next season. Quarterbacks very much play their ground. Now, there are definitely downsides to this. Because they play like this, there are certain situations where I'd say one of the worst things for Eagles fans, if you're an Eagles fan, you're watching this, you're probably saying to yourself, well, there's one problem we had, and that was double moves. I've heard it time and time and time again from Eagles fans. Double moves kill them. And there was a lot of big plays given up. I think one year they had the most big plays given up in the passing game, like over 40 yards. It's really bad. Double moves kills the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think that's a huge reason why, because of the way that they play. If you are going to play like that, you're going to stand your ground, you are susceptible to getting burnt. So if that is the case, you're either going to need to have safety help, because if you do get burnt, obviously the safeties are going to be a last line defense, or you're going to have to bring some pressure and hopefully get to the quarterback so he doesn't have enough time to wait for those double moves, because double moves usually take a little bit of time. That's kind of the risk reward there. Can you hold up? So I could see more blitzing next season. I talked about once, I'll say it again. I think with the additions of top cornerbacks, rely upon guys like Desmond Trufant was proven your number 3 pick. Yes, I get he's never played in the NFL. He's also the 3rd pick of the draft. You should be able to rely upon him. Amani, Justin Coleman, Michael Ford, those guys. I think when you look at those guys, I think for Matt Patricia, we could see them definitely blitz more. I don't know if it'll be a ton, but we could see it happen more. We know the Patriots have done that before, so I could see them blitz a little bit more next season, because he may have more trust in his cornerback's ability to hold up for the first couple of seconds, especially if they're taught the way that Cory Undlin has been teaching them. They teach very good balance, so you see a lot of cornerbacks in really good positions. Like I said, keeping their balance, that's something that's great. And passes defended. This is something that we know Justin Coleman was known for last season. And if you watch Darrell Bevell, if you just look at the stats by year, you can see passes defended are very, very high. And he teaches them, just like Matt Patricia does, to go for the ball. If you watch Matt Patricia, man, he has went over this in seminars or whatever. He's talked about how, they want their cornerbacks to play, how they want their defensive backs to play, going for the football, continuing, not waiting until the play's over. Well, when you look at Cory Undlin, that's something that they thrive upon year in and year out.
If it was a strip fumble by anybody, I mean, anytime you can be on the field, obviously we relish the role of being out there on defense and having the bat, putting the hat on ourselves and having a chance, hopefully, to make a play. And obviously this year it showed up more times than it hasn't. So anytime you can win a game on defense, and I'm not saying win a game on defense, or make a play to help us win the game,
sure.
Obviously there's nothing more satisfying to any coach or anything. And you'd ask the offensive guys or anybody, I mean, obviously it's a team victory for
every team he's at is passes defended. They find a way to get their hands on the ball, and that is huge. Okay, passes defended, interceptions, forcing turnovers, things like that. Getting their hands on the ball, that is huge, and that tells you a lot. Pass defended, I think, is going to be big next season, and that's a stat that we may be very high in. So definitely keep an eye out for that stat. So when I watch a guy like Cory Undlin and I watch his secondary, I definitely see certain little things that he teaches his cornerbacks and defensive backs that can be very beneficial for us. His safeties have been very talented as well. The safeties that he's had in the back end have been very successful, and I think Darrell Harmon again is a huge addition there, because when you watch how that free safety kind of plays for the Philadelphia Eagles, when they hit, for the Philadelphia Eagles and even for the Denver Broncos, safeties are a huge part of that defense. Whether or not they're playing man-to-man against a receiver, they're jumping on routes, they're using their eyes, and that is huge. I can see those guys have a big season. So I think, again, that goes to the addition of Darrell Harmon. So I think it all does tie together, and I think we could see Cory Undlin have the Darrell Bevell effect next season. And if he does, the Detroit Lions defense could greatly improve. Now, it doesn't need to want to be one of the best. We know that. It just has to be average, basically, if we have the offense like we did last season. And I think we could get to that spot. I don't see a reason that we can't. We have the talent on the roster. Now we need the coaching. Will Cory Undlin be that guy? I definitely hope so. Let me know your thoughts, comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.